2020 was quite a year. I want to start by sharing a video clip of us from Saturday, March 14th. This is the staff and I getting ready for our first online worship service the next day, and we were just such newbies. All right, we are recording.
Okay.
Test 1, 2, 3. Anything but that.
So welcome to Elk River Lutheran Church, live church version 1.0. Who wants to go play piano and sing?
I don't play piano.
You can cure up.
Someone play something.
Do, 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 do.
Oh man, just look at us there. I remember thinking on that day, I hope this online worship thing doesn't last too long because I do not know enough about online broadcasting and everything that goes into it. Well, I've learned. We've all learned. As a staff, we had to learn about online broadcast platforms. We had to learn about audio and video quality. We had to learn about lighting. Oh, the importance of lighting, right? Do you know that sometimes I duct tape my glasses to my head so I can change the angle of the lenses so that the light doesn't reflect off the lenses in a distracting way? Oh, the things we've learned, the things we do. You all have learned too. You've learned to be the church online, to talk to each other in the comments, and to be church, to record and share videos so that each week we can see and be reminded that we are not alone in this. We've learned how to gather in the parking lot for drive-in church. And in doing so, we celebrated baptisms and confirmations. With hoots and hollers and honks, we've proclaimed what we have learned, that the church was never about a building. That what we've said all along is true, that God is loose in the world and present right where you are. That as a church, as families, and as friends, God binds us together in ways greater than we could have ever imagined. That we don't all have to be in one room in order to be trusting in God's grace and accepting joyful community, serving God and neighbor. Thank you for your flexibility, for your generosity, for being willing to stick with learning new technologies even when you found yourself yelling not so nice words at a computer screen. We've all been there. For your willingness to be creative in reimagining how we can live out our mission in new ways. Thank you for helping me reimagine and expand my ideas of what the church is capable of. Thank you, and well done, church. I'm excited to dream with you this morning about this coming year and what I think God might be calling us to. And I want to do so framed in the story of Abraham, this part of the Abraham story that we heard read this morning, because here's what I know. Even though 2020 is behind us, not all of the challenges of this pandemic are gone. And I think that there are some ways in which 2021 might even be more challenging for us as a church than the previous year. And yet I also even more fervently believe that we will be blessed in this year, richly blessed, that God will use Elk River Lutheran Church to be a blessing. This is where Abraham comes in. At this point of his story, Abraham is just still called Abram. God hasn't changed his name yet. That will come later. But God speaks to Abraham, a blessing to Abram, I should say. Here it is. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. And I will bless you, and I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. These are beautiful words of blessing and promise. But what I want to highlight is that it's also kind of complicated for Abram. Here's what I mean. The Old Testament was a kinship-based society in ways that are pretty foreign to us. Your sole purpose in life in a kinship-based society was the survival of your kinship group. In ancient Israel, that had 4 levels. Your kinship group was the people, the kindred. Then there was your tribe, then your clan, and then down to your father's house. Quite literally, 3 generations living under one roof in a house like the one in the picture here. And your family's reality was grounded in your land. In ancient Israel, your whole life was a commitment to maintaining these things. And then Abram, to be Abraham, is chosen by God. Biblical scholars sometimes call it election, and it's an exciting, future-changing choosing, but there's a catch. Let's look back at these words. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. God says to Abraham, leave your country, your kindred, your father's house, all of those things that are most familiar and most important to you, leave them behind. God is calling Abraham way out of his comfort zone, leaving his house to live in a tent for a time. And then there's this element that Abram and Sarai, who will become Sarah, they're 70 years old and they have not been able to have kids yet. And so he's being asked to leave everything he knows behind and trust in this impossible miracle and unlikely future. All he has to hang his hat on is the promise of great blessing from God. God says, I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you. And I will make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all families of the earth shall be blessed. Elk River Lutheran Church, right now, I believe with all my heart that we are like Abraham and Sarah. God has promised to bless us so that we may be a blessing to others. But that blessing comes with an almost guaranteed time of discomfort and uncertainty. A time when we are all asked and challenged to trust God's promise. For decades, Sarah and Abraham waited to settle in their promised land. For 30 years, they waited for a child to be born. I don't know about you, but sometimes it feels like this pandemic's been going on for 30 years. It hasn't quite been that long, but the good news is so much of it is behind us. We've made it a long way. Some of you listening right now are already vaccinated. Others of you are on waiting lists. The end is in sight. But for us as a church, this is anything but an ending. It's a new beginning. In 2021, we'll be able to reopen the church. But rather than thinking about it as a reopening, I want to challenge you to think about it as a relaunching. Many of you remember when Elk River Lutheran Church was first formed and launched just 11 years ago. I've heard so many stories about the excitement and the joy of those early gatherings, the enthusiasm that those founding members had as they just kept telling more and more people about this new church and inviting them in. That's the relaunch energy that I'm excited about. The reality is, rather than just flipping a switch one day and saying, we're back, this late spring and summer will likely see a more gradual return to in-person worship, largely centered outside first, before eventually moving back into the building when the time seems right. This transition time will lead to a more of a hybrid form of online and in-person worship, where we learn how to keep, maintain, and grow this online presence, while also leaning back into the experience of in-person gatherings. Both are going to be important. I envision us owning a portable stage that gets quite a workout in 2021 as we look for all kinds of outdoor, in-person, and online broadcast opportunities to continue to be community, like live outdoor episodes of Sacred Wit and Beer and Hymns, of drive-in worship service with lots of people sitting in lawn chairs and sipping coffee from their travel mugs while they sing loudly. We'll look for ways and opportunities for our young people, families, and folks of all ages to gather outside for social and educational programming. We'll have some really great times this summer, I'm sure of it. We'll also re-engage our downtown community in the farmers market. Sadly, that probably won't include the bounce house this year, but we'll think of other more easily socially distanced events like the car show or music concerts and entertainment. Of course, I don't know exactly what the virus and new strains are going to bring this year, but I am confident that we'll be able to return indoors with opportunities to reimagine what some of our primary programming looks like. But here's the thing, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I don't know what our worship services are going to look like as we try to meet the needs of people in person and online. I don't know if it'll make sense to keep worship times and styles and everything the exact same as the pre-pandemic. I just don't know. What I do know is that we're going to be anxious to be together. And so I'm excited to dream of new ways to adapt previous programs and to create new opportunities for us to be together. Some of you know I had a birthday recently. If you didn't know, I turned 39. And so what that means is you have one more year with me as a pastor in my 30s. And after that, I'm turning 40 and I will be old and tired and washed up, right? So what you do have, you got this one more year with the energy of a pastor in his 30s. And I can promise you this, I will pour every ounce of that energy into this relaunching and reimagining what God is calling Elk River Lutheran Church to be in this new year and in our second decade as a church. I think this is going to be a joyful, exciting year, but I also think it's going to be a year that's sometimes going to be kind of difficult and exhausting. I'm going to ask you to join me in opening our hearts, our minds, our imaginations to this big and bright future. But I also know that there will be times where we will want to ask, you will ask, I will ask, well, can't we just do it the way we've always done it? And we could. We could. But I think God's dream and vision for this world and for our church begs something different, something bigger. Abraham and Sarah, they could have stayed Abram and Sarai, not becoming Abraham and Sarah, but instead living out their sunset years drinking wine on the beach. They could have. But not really. They couldn't. Because they knew of God's bigger dream and vision for their future. May we likewise be as bold and confident, seeing and following God's dream and vision for us, to be who God has called us to be. Say it with me. Trusting in God's grace and accepting joyful community, serving God and neighbor. Thanks be to God. Amen.